Call the March 19th work session to order at 6:02. Do you mind taking roll call for us?
Ms. Schilling? Ms. Williams? Mayor Anderson? Mr. Mackner?
Present.
Ms. Schulist? Mr. McDonald?
Present.
Mr. Callie?
Here.
Mr. Pape?
Here.
Ms. Senyard?
Present. Ethan, do you care to kick us off?
Tonight we have a conceptual plan from a potential applicant to the city who would like to hear your opinion. They have a short presentation over a project that they're working on, and they would like to hear everyone's view on how they feel that if this meets the 2040 plan. And they're in the audience, ready to go.
You'll come to the mic and introduce yourselves.
Awesome, thank you. My name's Kevin O'Brien from Cortera. I've got with me Josh Rowland from Kimley Horn. Wanted to thank you guys for your time. Say hello again to the planning new faces. Cortera is a subsidiary of Lennar, and you guys may recognize me. We've been here at the end of last year talking about a separate site. I want to be clear, tonight is a new site we plan to introduce that we've come into. You guys are probably quite familiar with it. It's the site right behind Jefferson's down here that's had a lot proposed on it. That's the site we have negotiated with the owner and the seller and have under control right now, and would like to talk about. Really, it's going to be a piece we'll leave with him for a commercial, a townhome, and a single-family home development. At that point, I'm going to let Josh kind of introduce it through this slide here.
Thanks, Kevin. Good evening. My name is Josh Rowland. I'm with Kimley Horn. I'm a land planner. Been working with Cortera and Lennar on the proposal before you tonight. As Ethan mentioned, we're here tonight to get your feedback. Just answer any questions that you might have, provide as much information that we have at this time. We're hoping to have a submittal together and be back before you in April. Let's get the submittal in April and probably before you the following month at Planning Commission. But with that, Ethan, if you're driving here, I'll let you click to the next slide. So we're going to go over kind of the project and the site context, give you a little background. We have some more information about some of the site constraints we'd like to share. We're going to talk about our specific development proposal. We have a concept plan too, and then also share with you some of the townhome architecture that Cortera is proposing. So to provide a little context, the site's about 48 acres. It's currently zoned RS40. I think, I want to point out that image on the left shows existing conditions. We've got two, call them streams and wetland conditions. They're channels. Each of them have kind of a series of wetland features that are connected through wet weather conveyances along each of those channels. Yeah, I think what's worth pointing out here is that while this site is situated along a nice commercial corridor, these types of features really prohibit, potentially like a big box type commercial. You'll see as we get into the plan, we're certainly preserving some valuable commercial space along the frontage. But our proposal tonight, we believe, is in line with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. As you can see on the right exhibit, about 70 or 80% of this site is in the residential transition portion of the future land use map. And then along the frontage, it's kind of split primarily with commercial corridor, a little bit of transition corridor on the south. One of the items we want some feedback on is just some inconsistencies between the future land use map and the ordinance as it relates to the residential uses that are supported by the future land use map. The little highlighted box down there points out that there's a variety of residential uses supported in the residential transition. You've got from RS15 down to RS5, RM8, and we're actually going to talk about a mix of those uses. We're going to Ethan, if you'd go to that next slide. We've talked with Ethan, met with him a few times. We're trying to come up with the right strategy that actually breaks this project into 3 separate projects. Kevin is with Cortera. Their parent company, Lennar Homes, is interested in single-family lots, and the seller of the property is going to retain the commercial zone property along the frontage. And because of some of the issues that have come up on previous projects, our goal is to have a subdivision plat and break this up into 3 separately platted, separately zoned parcels. So that it's very clear to you what you're approving and very clear to the end users what they're approved for. As I mentioned, actually, if you go back 2 slides, Ethan, I just wanted to point back out that currently the future land use map and the recommendations for residential transition have that variety of residential uses, but there's some conflict with the ordinance. There's some language in the RS5 and RS8 that says those aren't allowed outside of the town center areas, and those are, you can see those in 1, 2, and 3 up there closer to the center part of town. So, they're supported in the future land use map, but there's some language in the ordinance that does not jive with that. So we just wanted to point that out and kind of let you know that that's part of what we want some feedback on tonight. So Ethan, if you would, just 1 slide, please. Back to the breakdown, 10 acres of commercial on the front. We've got the middle RM8, 25 acres, and then about 12.5 acres of single family that's going to provide that kind of density transition as you move from west to east. Procedurally, our goal would be to come to you with 2 applications. One for a subdivision plat for these 3 parcels, and then second, follow that with a straight rezoning for these 3 zones. So that's what we've talked about. I mean, it's, that was Ethan's, I think, best advice at the time, but, he said, you got to bring it to Planning Commission. We need to get the governing body's input on this proposal. So what we've got on the next slide is a concept plan that shows you, tonight we're here with Cortera, and they're most interested in the RM8. And again, that was a use that's supported in the comp plan. It's not prohibited in the ordinance. It's part of that residential transition. We've got a series of garage parked, so townhomes with individual garages, and then a portion of our townhomes in the middle are surface parked. And this concept also has some separate standalone garages as well for those folks that have units without garages. The vision for the townhomes is a private Class A townhome development. It's going to have a clubhouse and kind of resort-style pool facility with a leasing center and a fitness area. The idea is that we have kind of a controlled, not gated, but an access point past the leasing center and the amenity center, private driveways to access and serve those townhomes. The commercial properties are shown in red along the front. I think this graphic here shows you even better really what we're dealing with on the wetland and the stream side. We've got those 2 distinct channels. It's a little hard to see in this light, but the darker green blobs, if you will, that are in line with those connecting lines, those are wetlands. We've had environmental scientists out. They've determined those are, in fact, Army Corps jurisdictional wetlands. The pieces of drainage that connect them are not jurisdictional, so we have some flexibility to cross those and to do some work in and around those conveyances, but the wetlands have to be buffered and maintained. And then the third component, the single family, we're proposing a public street, public right-of-way for those for sale homes. And again, just kind of high level, we've got commercial that's going to certainly benefit from rooftops right there next to it. The property, the seller has indicated that, hey, in order to make this commercial feasible and successful, we not only do we need the trips along Fairview Boulevard, but we also need the rooftops here. We've got the 25 acres of townhomes. We're right under the 8 units to the acre density that's in the RM8 category. And then we've got those 5,000 square foot single-family lots with the ability to provide a buffer along the east and north and south edges to those lots as well. We'll come back to this to answer questions and to point out any additional information that you need, but I'll quickly jump to the architecture for a moment. The next two slides, there's about 70% of the product is this product here. It's a garage parked townhome. It's got a driveway out in front of the garages. We got 2-car garages on the end, single-car garages in the middle. Each unit has a semi-private patio in the back. And then the next slide shows the surface parked townhome option that, it's about, I think about 30% of the product that we're proposing. Go to the last slide, Ethan, that's going to be what we're looking at. So again, it's, front porch, living rooms out on the front of the unit. And park right in front of your unit, similar to a driveway condition. And then we've got the semi-private patios in the back. So that's the overview of what we're talking about tonight. We're here to get as much feedback and direction as we can. We're excited about this project. We think the site with its constraints actually works well with the product and the program we're proposing. So thank you for your time. Look forward to your comments and questions.
Okay, we'll open up to commission members' comments and questions.
I do have a question, Madam Chair. Could you elaborate a little bit more about your protection of those identified wetlands? I always get really concerned when I see those on the map because I think about Bellevue and Waverly, and when you put so much damage on infrastructure, I would hate for flooding to be a result years to come. So could you elaborate a little bit more?
Sure. So, your subdivision criteria lays out some buffers and protection to those streams and those wetlands. So what you're seeing in there is both the wetlands and the proposed buffers. We've also, all of our storm drainage will be collected on site before it goes into those streams. So, part of that detention and water quality process is we capture the storm flow that's required. We treat it, and then we release it at a historic rate, which means the water's not getting into the streams any faster after development than it is, as it stands today as an undeveloped field. So there's a lot of real strict regulations that regulate how the detention works and make sure we're treating the quality of the water and also treating the volume of the water.
So, in summary, so your buffers to control water in and out.
You see there's those lighter green blobs outside of the wetlands and the streams. Those are the water treatment and detention ponds. And so the water goes there first before it gets led into the streams. So we have to do that water quality and water detainment before we can release it into the streams.
Madam Chair, I have a few questions for you. Do you have any idea yet, would you be on a public sewer, or would you have to have a drip field for your sewer?
Public sewer in the north, along the north property line, kind of in between, in that pocket where you see the opening between the single-family lots. On the right side of the stream, there's an easement that gets us to sewer. Thank you. Right here. Battery ran out, or I broke the button. But it's right up there, kind of where that stream exits the property. We have sewer in the street just beyond to the north, and we're going to tie in that way.
Okay.
We've had discussions with the Water Authority about
Dixon,
that.
okay.
And just to jump on that quick, we don't have it highlighted in here, but that's a parcel that will actually be conveyed with this property that's owned. So it's not highlighted as part of the development, but it's crucial for our connection.
Okay. And I think that was going to be my next comment. I personally appreciate that we are not using that property for a vehicular access. As, before, I think there were some concerns that would put a lot of traffic in between those houses. Speaking of traffic, obviously a traffic study would probably be warranted here. Do you feel confident that the one access point to Fairview Boulevard through that the CG is adequate, or would you foresee the need of having a second means of access, especially if the fire department would need that second means?
So you make a good point, and that did come up in some earlier conversations. This is a concept plan that is evolving, and I can see a couple other little things that may happen in the future. We do have, 2 connections off of Fairview Boulevard, and the idea with this kind of north-south running road is that it becomes kind of a parallel road to the major to keep some of the local traffic off of Fairview Boulevard, and as properties develop to the south, we'll continue that. There's not really an opportunity to connect through the convenience parcel to the north. It's hard to see here, but we have one of the goals is to keep the traffic from the townhomes separate from the traffic of the single family. If you think about it, it's kind of like low density apartment living, but it's really, so we don't want to have cut through traffic, but we're going to provide emergency access between these two, this private drive and the public street here. I can also see something similar, like maybe it's an exit-only type access point, so we can
Might at least
create a-
alleviate some traffic congestion at the other, yeah. Last question, the last time this was brought to, before the planning commission, I think there were some questions about buffering between this development and the neighbors, and this one particular exhibit, realizing it's very schematic, on the west side, which would be planned south, we do have some lower density properties there that abut the townhomes, and so that to me would be a concern. We would definitely want to see some good buffering through there for privacy.
You'll note on this plan, while it's a little more noticeable with the single family, we do have a fairly generous buffer, especially on the corners and along these edges where we could certainly plant, evergreens and that landscape buffer. I will say that the property is high. The high point of the property is along the back here, and it slopes down to these drainages. So at least along the north and the west or the east edge, property is below the neighboring properties, and that's actually the case throughout. This portion of townhomes does slope in this
Yeah,
direction
that's
to the
my
north.
primary concern there. Yeah.
And we have a good 30, 35 feet of area that we can plant a good buffer. If it's, building an opaque fence and doing some landscaping, we can certainly do that.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I have a couple of questions. Appreciate you guys bringing in and getting comments from us. I do recognize that our zoning ordinance and the comp plan doesn't exactly match up in all cases, and we're working on some zoning. We're working on a change to our zoning ordinance that hopefully will correct a lot of that. One of the challenges that I see here is you guys are kind of dividing this up into a bunch of straight zoning, and I think this is one of the pieces of property in our city that is absolutely set up perfectly for a POD. We're talking about additional buffers and things of that nature. We can show these concept plans all day long, but you guys know as well as I do, if we straight zone it, those buffers aren't guaranteed. I think it's a perfect opportunity. Even when you look at the 2040 plan, RM8 is permitted with a PUD at the time. Now it's POD. So RM8 technically isn't supposed to be there unless it's part of a POD. And I still think, maybe you could consider just the commercial being one and then the whole back being a POD. I do appreciate that. I think it's critical that we don't give up our commercial corridors, because we do have that need to grow. And it looks like the commercial is set up pretty well to maintain that. But I think we should be considering, or you guys should be considering more of a POD. I think also, I think most of the property behind it and surrounding it is R20. I think jumping right from R20 to RS 5 or 8 is pretty tight. Obviously, those buffers would help, but that's where a POD gives us the ability to say you have to have this minimum buffer or that minimum buffer and that. So that's my initial kind of gut check to it. I think it does work the way the transitional stuff is supposed to work, but I think if we straight zone it, we're not guaranteed this plan, and that's the challenge. I know a POD takes more time and more money up front, but that's, you know, in this particular case, this site's custom made for that because of the fact that you've got multiple uses designated in our future land use plan relative to it. So those are kind of my reactions. I'd love to lock in wider buffers in the back. I'd love to, you know, lock in maybe some different density. I mean, with the buffers, you know, you could even look at expanding those lots where you give those lots, those buffers as their property so that the lots are bigger, but it doesn't change how many houses you get on it, things like that. So I think this is a good start. I just think there's some work that needs to be done so that we're not sitting here going, oh yeah, that concept plan had great buffers. We straight zone it and then they go away. And, you know, unfortunately you guys can be the best developers in the world and stand here and tell us what you're going to do. But if we straight zone it, you could sell it tomorrow to another developer and they could throw all that right out the window. That's our challenge.
I would just add to that and appreciate the concern, and that's something we definitely spoke at length before on another site. As the developer, the timing that adds to us, and you had mentioned the upfront cost, but we're gonna have to go and horizontally plat, and to come in here probably add 6 to 9 months to our timeline, whereas at straight zone, we can come in, we're gonna phase our building and the way we'll CO throughout. With the environment being tight, I can tell you the 6 to 9 months makes it infeasible for us. We're out of kind of our criteria to build it. And then our second point, Lennar's gonna come and operate and they build their single-family homes the way that they do. And that's gotta run separate from how we're gonna come in as Corterra Development and do ours. We're a parent company and tied in, but we develop totally different.
And I hear you with all that, but that's not our challenge to figure out. That's your challenge to figure out. I'm telling you what I think is best for the city of Fairview. And, you know, it's just something that, you know, you need to just, you know, negotiate more time in your contract if you have to and figure that out and, you know, figure out the ways to do it. You can still do a POD, and have separate parcels that you can sell off so that, you know, you guys can do your thing and Lennar can do their thing, so.
I would just want to say I agree with Mr. Pape there. If Mr. Carter was here, he would remind us that once we approve the zoning, we're locked into that zoning. And just the board here has been faced with that. It's the reason why that's sensitive is we've had some issues with that now over the past few years, and so this is a prime property. Thank you.
A common kind of good thought, could we, within a BOD, bring some of the plating requirement out of that so that we could still be held and protect kind of what you're looking to, but allow us to kind of build it without the horizontal plating required first?
Ethan?
I think that's a city checking the ordinance or what variances are allowed. Also, I think there's about 3 of us on this board that were part of the 2021 proposal in the summer, who then brought it back in the fall. It has been approved here once and then went to BOC and failed. So while we can all give our direction, you know, the temperament's going to change based on the number, who's on the board at what time. But what I would say is the direction has been not to meet the 2040 plan, but to go less dense and do a PUD that was surrounded with at least RS-15 on the perimeter, if not RS-20, and then try to go dense right behind the commercial and try to like create a little bit more of a casual, like step back to butt up to those homes, because most of them are R20, but they're bigger than that. And people bought them years ago. They're estate lots. They're beautiful. They're wooded, and try to protect that and buffer them from the commercial that's coming in a lot of ways. And I know the conveyances, and I know there's a lot of money, but that's kind of why the lot's still there, is because we've kind of insisted on the PUD effectively. But I think while y'all tried to meet the plan, the 2040 plan, I think this was one of those lots that we've spoken to maybe they got wrong in the 2040 plan. Because like the transitional corridors they labeled will never be what they labeled because they were already zoned more dense than they labeled them on the 2040. So there's been a couple of situations where we've had to realize that it will never be what they zoned. They failed to check the current zoning when they did the plan.
You know, and I can only speak to, we obviously got to sit and hear maybe round 3 of when this was brought by the previous, and that RM8 was a request at the time. It was our belief, hey, what we're looking to do actually lines up with what you were looking at the last developer to do. Let's come and bring you all what we hear you're wanting. Get the pod concern, that's a little different than maybe I even heard the last time.
I think when it got denied by the BOC, he kind of said it as a, well, guess what? I can do RM8. And then found out he couldn't. He thought he could do with commercial general RM8. So I think it was a, well, you deny me, I'm going to go do.
Gotcha. And obviously, you know, his plan brought in age restricted and apartments, and he wanted, I think it was RM12, RM20. So we're significantly less dense. I understand it sounds like maybe this is still not in the intent of what you were looking for. I kind of left last time thinking we wanted a single family buffer. It sounds like this might be too small of a lot. You might be looking for a bigger lot, but still having the transition with, we're not going to go apartments, but the density of a townhome up to the commercial would make sense. Am I gathering right that we're closer, but we're just missing on some of those?
That would be my belief. Again, people have changed. Mr. Callie, Mr. McDonald, you were here, I believe, both in, for all of it.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Pape 100% that in this particular lot, fortunately for us, we're very familiar with it. Unfortunately, we've kind of made up our mind on what we want to see with it as far as having a pod on there just to protect the city. It's a piece, and then you know this is why you're interested in it. It can have a huge impact on our town, right, with where it's at. From the impact from the traffic, from the pedestrian traffic, from cars, whatever it might be, drawing attention to that end of town. I don't know what time you got here today, but as you can see, this time of day is not great for traveling through the city, and I think you put that many more homes on that end of town, trying to get this way in the morning and that way in the evening. I get that's a problem that's not your problem. That's our problem to figure out. However, it all just kind of ties back into if not having that pod, and again, nothing personal to you all. I'm sure you have every intention of moving forward. It's just if something happens, the market changes, whatever, it's an election year, crazy stuff can take place, and this doesn't go forward, then we're in a tough spot, right? And I think we are just and it's a good thing that we're being careful of, because as far as what we've seen on this property, this is far and away the best that we've seen so far, in my opinion. This is a step in the direction we want. Talking with residents in the area, they want ownership on that property. They don't want renters. So you guys check that box. You have single family on the outside. You've got a good sized buffer put in there. I think what you're presenting is great. It's just from a protecting the city perspective, we're hesitant to know if that is the ultimately what the product is going to look like if when you move forward.
I really appreciate that input, and I think the goal of this is let us go back and circle up. My fear is I think our easiest way, if a pod is considered, is it's probably all one use, because the way that we're a separate developer of this, I don't want to lose the single family. That's so important, but the way we're tied in, that's not a development we're part of, and to be tied to the pod, there's going to directly tie the timeline of us with a separate developer, though we're related, which is what helps us, in a way, master plan this, because we're going to work in this design, but then we hit the start line and go our own directions, which is what's important. Sure. So. No, I get that, yeah.
And listening to Commissioner Pape's comments about the pod, it makes sense having that final say in some of those, some of that control and the buffering. The nice thing about the single family, like if it's RS10 pod, there is some flexibility on playing with lot widths and sizes and setbacks within the pod, and then giving you what you're asking for, which is some of the buffers, be it on a lot or off a lot, kind of a thing. So maybe it doesn't necessarily impact density so much as it does add that timeline that is not.
Yeah, I mean, I would take a harder look at that timeline. I mean, I don't think, and staff might be able to comment more, I don't know that it would add 6 to 9 months. I mean, you still have to go through, you know, even with this, you're going to have a plat, you're going to have a development plan, you're going to have design review, you're going to have all those components. And, you know, with POD, you hit that all kind of with the master development plan. So, and again, I don't think that it makes it that difficult to split the two uses and everything. But, you know, that's your business. And you know, if that's the case, I mean, what we won't want is, I think, or at least my particular opinion is that you guys go to a pod because you hear we want a pod, but then you bring in a pod that's all one use. That makes no sense to do a pod. So, you know, that kind of defeats the purpose.
And I want to introduce my colleague Ray Crocker, he's run into kind of that challenge of the pod and the timing.
Yeah, and I think what the challenge is that for a pod, for individually platting, we would need to fully site develop it, stabilize it, survey it, submit the plat. That process is a lot slower than being able to get a certain portion of the site ready to start going vertical. So if there was a way that we could go to a pod and start going vertical prior to full stabilization, and I mean, maybe
The pod
phasing.
allows for phasing. The pod allows for multiple phasing. You just show it in your master development plan and you say, we're going to do this piece now, we're going to do this one next. And as long as that is listed in your original master development plan, all you have to do is the infrastructure for that first piece.
Right, so if you phased it, let's say 10 townhomes at a time, and you were able to keep that well ahead of construction so there's no stop of this, obviously it's a train. You got a set of subcontractors on there, and if they all demobilize, that's an economical issue for us. I mean, it starts becoming infeasible. So if there's a way to schedule it to where we know we're going to get a plat approval at a certain date so that our train can continue through, it doesn't stop the work, then the economics work. But what's looked at by everyone on our side and our investors is there's a huge risk there that the city says, no, this plat needs to have this little small issue change, and it takes 6 months or 8 months. We've run into this on many projects where plats take 6 months to get approved, which will stop the economics of the project. I'm just.
Well, that's fine.
experience.
And if that's the case, then this isn't the right site for you guys. But I think a phase with 10 townhomes is completely unrealistic. I think you should be looking at phases of slightly larger chunks and getting them platted as that. You know, but that's your business decision. We're just telling you what we think is best for the
Yeah,
city. And if
I
it doesn't work for you guys, that's
Town
fine.
Center has 6 phases to it. So, I mean, I would think you could break this up in 3 phases or 4 phases total. I think the city's been really good about working around small changes on plats here, right or wrong. They've been very accommodating. I do hear that y'all took feedback from the last lot and tried to apply it here. I do hear that and grateful for that y'all are trying to apply what we've asked for by breaking it up like we asked for on the last lot.
I think if we could figure out how to schedule it to where we're able to go vertical as soon as we have pads ready and not waiting for the entire site development to be completed, stabilized with a stand of grass, and that whole process that we go through on every other single-family development, I think that could work. I think it's going to take some understanding, a little bit more understanding about your process. What is the plat process here? What is the timing of submitting the plat from the time, I mean, what is your typical process to get a plat approved from the time it's submitted? I mean, on a phase, I don't know.
Our submission process for a final plat, it comes into our office. It has 3 weeks. You receive first comments back, and then you have a week to respond. Goes onto an agenda and goes in front of the planning commission. All in all, it's about a 6-week process.
So if we divided it into, say, 3 phases, 4 phases, then we're looking at a 6-week timeline delay versus one phase. Obviously, that's a 6 to 9 month slowdown for going vertical. So let us do some scheduling and look at that. Obviously, we need to work through what we can rely on your end and put it into a schedule, and then from there, I think the economics start shifting a little bit differently.
And just curious from a site development standpoint, it looks like 50% of this property is going to be impacted anyway because of the wetlands and that drainage, since you have 2 points. So I realize the phasing and the platting can be separated, but the drainage is going to have to be impacted as a holistic point of view anyway, right? And I know that's separate from maybe necessarily the way that you're going to finance this as a development, but
Well, and part of that is, we'll have a mass grading plan that has the erosion control and any of the sediment ponds that are temporary measures during construction. And so I believe we can accommodate your concerns through that mechanism and then finish out phase by phase the final. The nice thing about this is we can kind of, it's set up well where we could start in the low points and build.
Our typical process is the site work would be majority complete. I mean, we would have everything completed with all of the detention ponds, and we wouldn't go vertical until the first phase of pavement's in place so that we're setting lumber on pavement versus dirt. So that's on 50 acres. I've seen it where the entire site work's complete. It's just not at the final approval process, and that's what is an unknown to us, and that's what the risk is to you're standing there waiting to go vertical because of a plat and pulling permits and getting everybody in motion. So I think if we could just take this into some phasing thought, that may work out. I think other concerns of straight zoning to pod, buffers I heard, what were the other concerns of control that you guys want to see on the plan that would be different than what we're showing now?
So I had a question I figured we'd wrap that topic up. And then, I know a traffic study hasn't been completed, but you have an idea of the impact that you're going to be bringing to the area. Is there any, turning lanes or anything that you've already identified that you know are going to have to happen, just so we can be clear on what you're already thinking and then kind of go from there on what may or may not be needed as far as improvements in the area?
It's my understanding that, when we get to the final, the construction drawings, that's when the traffic study is required. So I don't know today what those are, but that's part of the required process.
You're right.
We'll be prepared.
Yeah, I was just curious if you had any, thoughts that you put into it.
think
Probably
for-
going to need this here or this there type thing.
For this number of homes, what I've seen is definitely a decel lane for each one of the entrance points. The question would be, is there a center turn lane required? Is there right-of-way in place for that? Those are the questions that the traffic study is going to tell us.
Yeah.
The traffic study is going to need to consider the trips for the commercial and all the residential as well. So the center turn lane is always a question of whether that's needed.
Yeah, that was in my head. That was what I was thinking. I just think of, as we witnessed coming in here today, you've got that line of traffic and people are waiting to turn left. You could back us up all the way to Bellevue.
I agree, and my feeling is that a center turn lane would work well here. It's just, the question is the right-of-way in place? What's the process to get that if it's not?
Yeah.
Am I correct in remembering the previous developer had done a preliminary traffic study and he thought he needed a dedicated turn lane in and out?
In the center of the road, so you would,
I don't remember it being the center. I thought it was,
I can't recall personally. I don't know.
the decel lanes would definitely be needed here. Dedicate whatever right-of-way is needed on our side of the road. The question is, could we dedicate more? Does that offset the center of the road? It becomes a question of what right-of-way is in place.
I also think, as of the time, the previous developer, TDOT, had a plan to come in and widen this themselves, which has since been delayed, but I think that was a factor in his plans that has changed.
I think personally, and maybe some of the comments to it, is that I think no matter how you phase it or I know it's come up with a lot of developers. They're like, hey, I do the multifamily, I do the single family, I do the townhomes, and so I need to space them. But it would be great to see it arranged more like a traditional neighborhood development that's kind of gradual and spaced, so we're not just one product and one product. It just seems like a great lot for that you're transitioning from commercial to a little bit denser to a little bit, less dense and getting a good community feel around it. Just some really great opportunities in that lot to kind of have a more of a traditional neighborhood development set up with a little bit more flow and not segregated.
Private roads are another challenge.
And I'll just, I don't want you guys to think I'm being all negative here. So I do think this is a good concept plan. I think it's the perfect start for a good master development plan for a POD. I do agree with Ms. Inyard where I think the lots in the back could be a little bit bigger because those are R20. I'd like to see those a little bigger. I think the transition from townhome to that is the perfect transition. I think that's a great thing. I think since there is going to be commercial up front, I don't know that's going to happen right away, but will be in the future. I'd love to see more pedestrian connectivity that show sidewalks so that people can walk. If I'm living in the back there, I don't want to have to get in my car and drive up to whatever restaurant lands there or whatever, so I think more pedestrian connectivity. I think the wetlands really enhance the character of it, give a little more green space, maybe some walking paths along that as well, things of that nature. But focusing on buffers, bigger lots in the back, and some pedestrian connectivity. One question in kind of the south corner there, the southwest corner, what's the depth of that commercial? That's kind of the thinnest commercial. Do you guys know off the top of your head?
It's about 2.25, about 225.
Okay. Yep. That's just about right for out parcels. Okay, cool.
You've got room for certainly a nice standalone pad site there.
Yeah.
2 or 3 in the middle. And
Yep.
I know the sellers had some thoughts of doing something a little larger there in the north.
Yeah.
Note on the connectivity for pedestrian, this is a concept, obviously, but in all of our communities, we would have pedestrian walkway, sidewalks throughout the entire project and through the wetlands where it's allowed. We would put, amenity spaces, just kind of communal spaces within all of that. So this is not drawn to show that final plan, but that's just our MO to bring the community together with pedestrian kind of destination points to congregate and be a neighborhood.
Final comments?
I just wanted to give staff an opportunity to speak to when you guys were kind of having a little powwow on what you could do or how you think you could manage it if we were to go the pod direction. In hearing, is there anything that staff heard that you felt like that probably isn't going to work? I mean, I'd hate to send you guys out with hopes and dreams, and then it turns out we wasted your time, is all I'm trying to get at. Is that feasible? Do you feel like that's something we could come to terms on, or?
The pod, as you are aware, it would come in front of you as a master development plan, and then it goes to the Board of Commissioners, has a first reading, and then it has a public hearing and a second reading if it gets to that point. After that point, you would have an approved master development plan. They would come back in with a development plan that's in substantial compliance that would come before you as the Planning Commission. And then following that, they would present construction drawings to us. Our engineering staff would review those construction drawings to assure compliance with all zoning and codes. And then they would come in for a final plat. And we've had final plats that come in 9 months before subdivisions are ready to go vertical. Cumberland Estates, for example, is a PUD. They had their plat approved for Phase 6 and Phase 7 back in July of 2023. They are supposed to be bringing it into my office in the next couple weeks to get final signatures on it, to get it recorded so that they can go vertical on Phase 6 and Phase 7. So, I mean, as far as the final plat goes, it's really on your timeline. If you want to come in early for that, we can have everything kind of in line that works with your.
Trigger that final survey, do you guys consider a condo a situation where you can come in later and plat it, where you're able to paper plat it now, show where it is, and then you have to meet that at a later date so that you can pull permits prior to a final plat? I mean, is that something that y'all have seen? I mean, I've seen in other municipalities where that's been paper platted and then final approved after permit. that timeline is what we're trying to work around.
Kevin, we can get you an answer on that.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, and just want you all aware of one other concern. I mean, the biggest thing we're worried about here is entitlement risk. It's a significantly higher amount of due diligence and dollar spend to be at the mercy of being not approved for a pod that would just be dollars out the door. I don't know that we can get that approved in front of our investment committee. But I hear that. I think we've heard a lot of great things here, things we can easily incorporate, things we can make better, and some things that are going to be a challenge we want to go think on. But certainly appreciate the time. I don't know if anybody has anything else. It's been valuable for us and hopefully valuable for you guys too.
Something I may add to what Ethan said. I understand terminology changes from municipality to municipality, so I'm sure we just threw a bunch of words on you. You're like, what's a development plan? What's a master development plan? And you may know, but I invite you to read through our regs, and planning staff can definitely assist in kind of deciphering those. We understand they can be complicated and combative sometimes. So a master development plan is conceptual in nature, and it can be amended. So if there's something that changes from the concept, really, the development plan just has to be in substantial compliance. So there is flexibility there. That's what we're trying to explain, is that I just want to make sure there's not like an expectation that you're locked into an exact thing. There is flexibility in our regs that allows, changes to occur. But we will definitely, answer any questions you have in that regard to help you kind of plan and see what the actual cost would be for providing a master development plan for a pod.
I'd just like to add that I appreciate the back and forth. You guys have been open to everything we're saying. It's not been, throw your hands up and walk away as soon as we push back a little bit. I think all in all, personally, I can only speak for myself. The product that you're presenting to me, I don't have a problem with. It's just the zoning and the risks that come with that. So I'm only one, but take that for what it's worth.
And I'm been excited for someone to do something with this property. This is my area of town. I'm excited to walk over there. I'm one of the neighbors. So I've been excited for the commercial to come and the walking paths and stuff. But again, it's got to be done right because it is more estate lots. And these are people just hanging out in their backyard. This is not farmers or something, they are just hanging out in their backyard sitting. And so all this development coming is noise and things they never thought was going to be backing up to them.
Well, we'll take the feedback and work on it and hopefully be back to you guys in a month or so. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Take a break till 7.